Well, you talk about prosecuting, the possibility of prosecuting the president or the vice president. There's been some talk over in Europe that the president may be that the president may be guilty of war crimes. If the Hague came to whoever the next president is and said, we want George Bush, how should the president respond?
Well, I think that if I recall, early on in this Bush administration, they passed some presidential signing order that the United States would be, and its officials, elected officials, would be exempt from the World Court in The Hague. So if that in some way did become the law of this land, that would have to be changed. Otherwise, if that remains the law, then, but certainly after the 9th of January 2009, if that's inauguration day, or the 20th. 20th, yes. The president would no longer be an elected officer of the United States.
Well, you talk about prosecuting, the possibility of prosecuting the president or the vice president. There's been some talk over in Europe that the president may be that the president may be guilty of war crimes. If the Hague came to whoever the next president is and said, we want George Bush, how should the president respond?
Well, I think that if I recall, early on in this Bush administration, they passed some presidential signing order that the United States would be, and its officials, elected officials, would be exempt from the World Court in The Hague. So if that in some way did become the law of this land, that would have to be changed. Otherwise, if that remains the law, then, but certainly after the 9th of January 2009, if that's inauguration day, or the 20th. 20th, yes. The president would no longer be an elected officer of the United States, nor the vice president, Cheney. But that remains yet to be seen. More, I'm concerned about restoring what damage has been done to us, what damage we've done to others, so that we can pick up our image in this world again. I mean, we were keepers of the peace, and we need to be regarded like that once again.
Talk about the damage to others. You specifically mentioned Iraq in your previous answer. Many opponents of the war in Iraq, though, have been supportive of the original mission in Afghanistan. What's your position on our involvement in Afghanistan?
Well, my original, after I went through the same sort of shock with the events of September 11, 2001, and then would see on television the outpouring of sympathy in cities throughout the world. I remember Copenhagen, Denmark, in London, people coming in the evening with flowers and with candles and having great sympathy for our country, that we have fallen from that grace. And I recall that they're reading a lot of emails at the time that if, as our president was telling us, there are these people in the world that hate and want to kill every American, that there must be some reason for that. You don't usually, that doesn't happen just because you don't look right. It's from some course. That maybe we ought to look at why they feel that way. And I thought one immediate response might be to drop food supplies, to drop medical supplies, to make friends with these people so that they wouldn't be so influenced by the fundamentalists in their country that were trying to foment this dislike for Americans. And I think in the long run it would have been a far less expensive and far more successful course than to start dropping $1 million a piece smart bombs on the poor Afghanis, trying to ferret out one guy. It reminded me of Bush Sr. going after Noriega in Panama and practically burned the city to the ground without regard for the people who lived there, trying to catch one man. And the man got away. And I don't know how you lose a close to 7-foot Arab fellow who's on dialysis in this world when you've spent trillions of dollars to hunt him down. And it seems a bit bizarre to me.
Moving forward, it's kind of the next hotspot looks like it's going to be the conflict between Russia and Georgia, and Russia and perhaps Russia and some of the other former Soviet republics.
Yes.
How should the U.S. respond to the conflict between Russia and Georgia, or Russia and some of their former republics?
I think that's a very difficult situation, but I really am a man who favors diplomacy. I think the human race has grown up enough that even enemies can sit across each other from the table with some moderators present and put their problems out on the table and work to some resolve. I was surprised to read, I think, in yesterday's paper, that Condoleezza Rice is out there rattling the saber, and today Russia's response is they may be pulling out of their accord with NATO. This is very unsettling news, and I don't think the militaristic approach should be the first. I think that we owe ourselves and we owe this whole planet every opportunity to try to discuss our differences and try to work them out.
And then one more question, then I'll take some questions from the audience, but one more in this kind of realm.
Sure.
You had mentioned FISA
yes.
previously. What do you see as the balance between increased security and our personal freedoms? How do we balance that, especially in a post 9/11, post terrorist kind of a world?
Well, the FISA law was put into place, the FISA Act, and it set up a special court. The government, if it wanted to wiretap, could go to that court. Actually, under the original FISA that got changed last August and changed again this year, it allowed the court to go ahead and do the government to do the wiretap, say on a Friday, and go to FISA court on Monday. And there were a very small, perhaps not even a handful of incidents in the hundreds of times the government had used that the court ever refused to issue the warrant. It was not a problem. It was not an impediment. And I just believe that this administration has been bullying our Congress into giving it extra power, extra power, extra power, and it has been a denigration of our rights under the Fourth Amendment against unreasonable search and seizure. And I just don't think that we needed that type of overreaching of our rights in order to protect ourselves.
Do you think if a Democrat is elected president, certainly I hope so,
yes.
But if Senator Obama is elected president, do you think a Democratic Congress would take away the powers that a Republican president had expanded over the last 8 years? Or do you think they will leave them in place because it's now a Democrat in charge?
Well, I think the basic assumption is each president comes into office and he accepts from the prior president all the powers the prior president had. Typically, people who have gained that type of authoritarian role don't like to give them up. Would a new President Obama give them up? It remains for us to see. Should Congress actively be striking down the presidential signing orders of President Bush? Absolutely. Should it be modifying the FISA court back to its original jurisdiction? Yes, it should. I think that we need a strong Congress. I talked earlier about the balance of powers that were set out in the Constitution, and I see them very eroded. And I believe we need a strong Congress. And I have some ideas of why Congress has been behaving the way it has and not standing up to the president. And we need a refreshment. And I can tell you that I am not a unique impeachment candidate, okay? Rather, there are 105 of us presently on the ballots throughout the states. 3 for president, 12 for Senate, and 90 of us for the United States House of Representatives. So we do, the voters of the country, have a great opportunity this year to refresh the personnel and get out some of these lifelong career politicians who are in the hands of the lobbyists who are bringing, according to Harper's Magazine, in this past year, for every day that Congress has been in session, lobbyists have carried over $16 million a day in there. I mean, that creates a culture. And we know that less than 0.5% of our population ever gives to a political campaign $200 or more. Well, you don't make up $16 million a day on under $200 contributions. So there's a very narrow band that's getting the ear and the eye and the hand of our present career politicians. I think we owe it to ourselves to refresh the House, I like to say. And I have no long-term plans to stay there until I'm 102. You know, I would like to go and serve one term, do the best I can. If you folks are satisfied with that and you would like me to run again, I would consider doing it, but it isn't my ambition to be a career politician.